Well, Shawn, thanks so much for taking the time to sit down with me today here at the American Seed Trade Association's Corn, Sorghum, and Soybean Seed Research Conference in Chicago. How long have you been coming to this?
So this is actually my only second year at ASTA.
Okay.
Been with Syngenta just about 25 years, but I never had the privilege of going to ASTA before.
So what do you think, having been fully immersed for the last 2 years?
I think it's a great show. Anytime you can sit down with customers, talk to them, talk about their business, their needs, and then see how your products fit into their business is always a positive thing.
And tell our viewers a little bit about what you do. You're head of marketing for Syngenta Seedcare, and you've been in that role for 2 years now, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, so I head up the marketing group, and within my team, specifically for seed treatment or seed care, what we do is we have the technical product leads. So they're the ones that really look at the new technologies, work with our R&D group, ensure that the performance is there, that the seed safety is there, that we can apply it on the seed. And then we also have the product marketing group, which takes a look at our products compared to the competitive products and makes sure that A, it makes money for the grower, B, it makes money for our channel partners, and C, that it has some different aspects to it than other products already in the market.
And seed treatments have been a hot topic for the number of years, both inside the seed industry because of what it allows us to do, as well as externally for maybe some not so good reasons. Tell me, what have you been working on the past 2 years?
Yeah, so for Syngenta specifically, we've been in the industry for over 40 years now. This is our 40th anniversary, as a matter of fact, of innovation. And the challenge is to keep finding new products or to developing new technologies and tools for the industry and for customers. And if you look at it, some of those products are under pressure. And that's kind of what you were talking about, some of the regulatory concerns, some of the regulatory pressure. So how do you keep developing new products, bring them into the marketplace and keep that technology and move that yield up for customers?
And are you watching other companies right now or considering maybe some non-traditional solutions that, such as nutritionals or biologicals or microorganisms and things that maybe don't have an active component?
Yeah, absolutely. If you take a look at the marketplace, it's really been fungicides were the first introduction. There's some safeners that go on as a seed treatment. Insecticides came a little bit later. We just introduced a brand new product called Sultra, which is more of a nematicide, sudden death syndrome product. But then there's a lot of work going on around biologicals, and that's what a lot of people talk about is the biological space. We actually introduced our first biological in 2014 under Clariva, which was Pasteuria to help control nematodes. What I would say is that when we research biologicals specifically, you look at a biopesticide, that really has pesticidal claims. So whether it be insect control or disease control, nematode control, is a little bit different than biostimulants. And a lot of the market is kind of looking at a biostimulant side right now, which kind of gives that crop that vigor, that health effect that comes out of the ground. And then obviously biofertilizers are out there as well too.
Are you concerned from a marketing standpoint or product availability about some of the regulations or rules that might be coming down the pipeline, both from the EU as well as the US?
Yeah, so if you take a look at the two countries, the regulatory system is a lot different. One's a science-based, so EPA is very much a science-based organization. So within Syngenta, we are a very science-based company. We do the stewardship, we do the product registration process to make sure that it adheres to all the standards that we need in the market. Whereas the European Union is a more risk-based regulatory system, which is a lot more difficult to sustain and get new registrations in. So within the US, we're not as concerned because it is science-based and it is based on facts that we can manage and help to prove that the efficacy is there or the performance or the environmental stewardship practices are there as well too.
How closely are you guys monitoring that, or are you waiting to see how that shakes out before you might continue down that path, whether it's announcing new partnerships or moving a product further down the innovation pipeline?
Yeah, so if you look at what I would say some of the regulatory things that are going on in other parts of the world, one of the big initiatives is stewardship and education of our customers. And that's a big component for us because even though it is science-based, you don't want to risk anything. And so the more you can educate your customers on things like dust off and proper seed disposal, all those types of things, the lower the risk there is. Now, unfortunately, in other parts of the world, they are losing actives, they are losing products. So Syngenta being a global organization, we are absolutely active in that biological space. But we do have strong standards too. They still have to give a good return on investment for the grower. They still have to be able to control the pest to an adequate amount. And sometimes those things also have very high costs associated with them. So how do you make sure that that all balances out? We did just introduce a new biological part of our organization, just headed up here recently, where we're looking at either in licensing types of compounds, acquisition, or development of our own products as well too.
Mm-hmm. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so Corey Huck is heading up our new biological group. And the reason being is that Syngenta by nature is a very synthetic manufacturing company. We're really good at taking synthetic compounds, and our efficacy rates are extremely, extremely high. So you've got to be 90+% control of most things. And it takes a different mindset when you get into the biological space. And that's why they kind of started this separate group up under Corey, saying, okay, when we look at biologicals, how do we look at these differently? How do you go to market differently? And then kind of learning from other customers or other companies that have been in that marketplace in prior years. Mm-hmm. So for example, on synthetics, you can get shelf life 2, 3, 4 years really easy. A lot of biological shelf life of them is not very long. Mm-hmm. Use rates are really, really high as well too. So when you start talking application technology, all those types of things, you have a lot of things to consider. So there's a lot of hurdles, I'd say, in that space, so you have to overcome. They're not insurmountable, but you do need a focus group really on that area.
Do you know, is the strategy there to do some things in-house, or to bring in outside kind of innovations from maybe more just R&D companies and to go to market with those? Or
yeah, so it'll be all the above, to be honest with you, because short term, there's a lot of companies that have done a lot of work, a lot of screening. You look at the marketplace, there's a lot of bacillus species out there already. So to get into the market quickly, working with other companies in collaboration is really your quickest way into the marketplace. Mm-hmm. Mid to longer term, you can look at some of those companies that may not have the equity into their organization that they need. Mm-hmm. So more of an acquisition strategy where you can help fund them and help them kind of grow. But we do have a lot of experts on our R&D capability side. So then we will always longer term in that 8 to 10 years look at development. But unfortunately, to develop a product does take 8, 10, 15 years. So you have to kind of work your way through the process.
Sure. Tell me, what are your plans for 2020? What are you hoping to achieve, and what are your goals?
Yeah, so we just launched a brand new product called Saltro into the U.S. marketplace, and it's really exciting. What it is giving exceptional performance against sudden death syndrome, and it's a very, very emotional disease or pathogen for farmers because they don't see it early on, and then they get into August and the crop just starts dying, mm-hmm. Premature death, and it can cause up to 50% reduction in yield. And it's so strong on the pathogen or sudden death fusarium species that we're seeing extremely good results. We're seeing 3 to 4 bushel over our main competitor on it, which for our seed care product is really good, not just over an untreated check, but just over main competitors as well too.
How did that product come to be? How does it work?
Yeah, so molecule is a depidin, and we looked at it. It's part of an SDHI chemistry group, and there's quite a few SDHIs on the marketplace. So our scientists actually looked at the SDHI molecules, and what we say is we basically customize one to work on certain pathogens or certain diseases. And so we first looked at it in the foliar side. It's registered as a foliar fungicide. And now we're working on it as a seed care product as well too. And one of its strengths is absolutely the fusarium species. So in crop, it's fusarium head scab is really good. And then we have it in corn and soybeans as well too. So it goes across function, but as a seed care product, it's working really, really well.
Good. And that's available for 2020?
Yeah, so we just got it registered in, I think, end of August, start of September. And so our first sales are kind of going on now with the first use where growers will be able to experience this spring. So,
Are you targeting certain regions that maybe are more prone to that, or do you, with that kind of initial rollout, or is it kind of national Midwest focused?
Yeah, so if you look at sudden death syndrome, it does tend to be more in the Midwest. There are a few areas kind of a little bit southern, a little bit more, I'd say some pockets. But primarily it's soybeans in the Midwest is where SDS is a big issue.
What are some of the you mentioned some of the numbers behind Saltro, but if you can dig into that a little bit more in terms of the number of years that you guys have been testing the product, and then what you're seeing growers say on the ground, if you have any of those comments.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you look at Adepidin, I think this will be, I think the first registration was 1.5 to 2 years ago. So that was about 8 years from start to finish to get the first technical registration as a foliar application. Seedcare followed about a year and a half after that. So we're right around 10 years now of development, which is for a molecule about a $230 million investment. And that's why you look at it for all the different uses you can possibly do. As far as what growers are seeing is that prior to 2014, they didn't have a lot of options for sudden death syndrome. The Nalevo came into the marketplace at that point in time, and it absolutely helped growers in their production and controlling that. Now, what also occurred, though, is it has a little bit of root pruning or crop injury that comes with that. And so growers are seeing much better control overall of sudden death syndrome. But what they're also seeing is it's not having the negative implications of crop phyto or crop injury that come with the current product they're using. So you kind of get the best control and no offset negative issues as well too.
Good. How is the seed treatment landscape changing, and then how is Syngenta adjusting to that?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple different things that are dramatically changing in the seed treatment space. There was kind of a trend line for a while to just look at visual quality of the seed. So as long as it was red or a different color and it was the brighter the better. Farmers are getting more educated about what's on their seed and how it performs and how it controls things. So that's really positive from a company that's investing heavily in new technology. So for us, that's what we keep talking about, is always look at what's on, not just the color. The second thing is that as society kind of changes, we talked about risk-based versus science-based regulatory system. Unfortunately, society is more skeptical about our food production system and what's going on. And so that's where we really focus also on stewardship and education from a customer standpoint, because the more we can work with people that aren't involved in farming, the better off we are. And there's simple things just like reading label directions, using seed lubricant so you don't have dusting issues, abrasion. If you spill seed on the ground, to cover it up so you don't impact wildlife. All those little things are so important now, because what we know is when EPA registers the product today, just about instantly someone's suing them. So the more we can do from a stewardship for all the tools and technologies that are out there, the better off it is to help, so we can also bring new technologies to the marketplace.
And some advancements are certainly being made in making information more transparent at the applicator level, as well as technological advancements when it comes to innovation.
Yeah, so innovation is occurring in all things, right? So if you look at the Syngenta organization, we will focus on 3 core areas. One's the product, so how do we get new chemistry? We talked about that and investing heavily. But the other side is actually the application side. So we've just put in a Seedcare Institute about 4 or 5 years ago into place. And really what that whole focus is to ensure that the treating experience is the best possible, but the seed treatment stays on the seed, and then it gets into the ground where it's going to do the performance and the best as far as what the grower paid for. And that technology has come a long way. The automation process from seed treating, and what we're really finding is a lot of the older technology, the accuracy just isn't there. And it's part due to formulations, but part due to equipment. So we've been working with other customers on the equipment side to match that up with our pre-mix formulations to get kind of the best uniform coverage of seed as well too.
And you're working on the global level, and so you've got a lot of people that you're working with, both internally as well as externally. How do you bring everybody around the table so you're all kind of on the same page and talking the same language and moving in the same direction?
Yeah, I'm going to say it's not always easy because with more people comes more opinions. But I think it's just really around communication, transparency, communication, willing to listen and learn as opposed to just having all the ideas. So what we do is we actually do a 5-year planning process organizationally so that we have good transparency of what we're thinking, what we're doing, and then it's kind of that back and forth of how could we approach things differently. The other thing that I always think is important is that if you listen to customers, so the more connected you can be to a customer side of the equation, the easier it is for an organization to get behind you, as opposed to kind of a pet project or something else. So we spend a lot of time with the customers, listening to them, identifying what needs they have, what resonates with them, what they'd be willing to do, all those types of things. So as long as you got kind of the customer in mind, good communication process, it usually works pretty well.
Yeah. When the previous session was talking about the farmer of 2040 and who that person is or who that farmer is, what do they look like, what are their needs, and so in listening to the customer, what changes are you guys prepared to make, or what are you planning on doing over the coming years to meet their needs?
Yeah, so it's interesting because the average age of the customer never changes. Which is kind of confusing, but if you actually step back a lot, what we're seeing in the customer base is that the people coming back into farming now are from a farm or their dad farmed, that type of thing. They're very well educated and they're extremely good agronomists. So I always reference that when I grew up on a farm, my dad was a really good mechanic. Wasn't that great of an agronomist, to be honest with you. And I went to school and I got my agronomy degree and I got to know agronomy and kind of made a career out of that. That's what we're seeing in farmers too. And so what we see now is that they are doing a way better job of being able to increase production, knowing what they're doing. The types of things they're looking for are a little bit past agronomy and stuff are now as well too. So there's a lot of conversation about digital agronomy and what does that mean. And reality is digital will absolutely assist them. Now, how it assists them or what it does is the question. What I kind of reference sometimes is like a mechanic. So early on in a mechanic, what he would do is he'd kind of drive the car around, think he knew what he'd fix, and then fix something, and then it wouldn't work, and then he'd fix something else. Now what you can do with agronomy and digital agronomy is kind of plug the computer in, say, okay, here's all this information, here's all this data, and now you can make informed decisions based on a lot more information. So you'll see production continuing to grow with the new generation of farmer.
Less of an art and more of a science.
It still takes some human intervention. They think it's all going to be automated, but it still takes some technique.
Sure. What's your biggest daily challenge?
I think that the biggest daily challenge is to not become internal focused. Because you have budgets, you have registration processes, you have all these things going on. Yet if you can stay focused on the customer and be true to what the customer wants, that really should be your guiding kind of light to where you go. And it's always difficult because the day-to-day stuff is all internal. But the real thing that you want to focus on is that customer and how to make sure you're making him successful, and in turn that will make you successful.
And when you look at, I'm kind of going back and forth a little bit here, but kind of more back to the stewardship part of the equation and some of the increased scrutiny from consumers and what's happening there. Over the last, I don't know how many years, 5, 7, 8 years, there's been a big push for pollinator plantings, pollinator education. Syngenta has done a huge amount of work in that area and been a big supporter of Seed World and helping with some of that messaging there. And so how are you measuring that? Are we moving the needle? Do you feel like the pollinator plantings and some of the garden plantings have counteracted some of the scrutiny around neonics?
I'd say that there's always going to be scrutiny. The degree of understanding and the amount of work and research that's went on has been immense. the understanding of why colony collapses are going on has been very positive, in my opinion. So with all the bad things that you hear about it, it has forced organizations to really understand a lot more of what's happening, where bees are getting refuge from. So like clover and ditches is extremely important, habitats for them. Just the other side of the equation, though, is the awareness from a grower standpoint is extremely positive too. So that they know that they have an ownership in this, and that if they have someone with beehives around, they should inform the person. All those things I think are really good to get that collaboration between the broader community and the agriculture community to really talk a lot more together. Mm-hmm. As far as metrics, we do know that we are making an impact, that people are getting the message out there. So we've done a lot around the Be Sure campaign and the metrics around that the customers are getting it. So that's to me always a positive outcome from what someone would consume, say, as a negative issue, is you start talking and taking more proactive action than we probably had been before.
Mm-hmm. And as we kind of round out our conversation and round out the year here, will you be taking a break for the holidays?
Yeah, absolutely. This is kind of the crunch time right before we get a few weeks off here. And my family and me, the last few years, have always decided that we take a cruise. So we're taking off on a cruise on December 21st and cruising the Caribbean for a few days.
Very nice. And so I was going to ask, how do you recharge or re-energize?
That's about it. Sitting out in an ocean and thinking about nothing.
Very good. Well, Shawn, thanks so much for sitting down with me today. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.